Only 33% of candidates who accept roles are actually negotiating. And recruiters are always expecting you to negotiate because they are not even offering you the top of the salary band.
We'd like to offer you the role at $60,000. You were so excited to get your very first position, you immediately accepted. And since then, you've taken what you think is a fair jump to your next role. But that has led you to a career on the clearance track. Today's guest, Candyce, did that too. Only now she's breaking the cycle and showing you how you can break it too. In this episode, you're going to learn how to finally secure the pay your work actually deserves. So let's jump right in. Candyce, if I'm listening, how do I know if I'm on the career clearance track?
Such a great question, and thanks for having me on. There's many signs, but I do like to narrow it down to three that I see most common, and one that presents the most evidence, and that's that you've stopped negotiating. You're getting these offers, you don't really like the number, and you're ignoring that sign, that feeling in your body that says, "I want more than this. I know I deserve more than this." But you stop negotiating and you just keep taking what's offered over and over and over again. And you are 100% certain that it does not reflect your actual contribution in the workplace. So that's usually the first sign, is that you're not speaking up, you're not using your voice. The second sign that I see is, and especially for women in the workplace, your workload is continuing to grow, but your compensation is not growing at the same rate. And that's happening to, again, women in the workplace. And that actually starts even before the interview process, when we won't even apply for the jobs if we don't meet all the qualifications. However, when we get in the role, our workload is exceeding our pay. And that is a sign that you are on the clearance rack, right? And then the last one is that you don't have any stake in the decision-making process. So when it's time for those big decisions to be made, you're constantly not at the decision-making table, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
all know what that feels like.
That sounds very much like kind of reactive versus proactive. I'm waiting for the opportunity to come to me. I'm going to take whatever does get offered, as opposed to I know what my value is, what my work is worth, and let's kind of go after that proactively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't wait to share kind of how to start unpacking that with the value framework.
Oh, yes. I am super excited to get to this. Just before we get into that part, though, I'm curious to hear kind of how we got there. You mentioned that this happens early on. And I know that when you and I talked, there was a whole lot more behind that. Can we go a little deeper? What are your thoughts?
On how we got to this place where we're constantly putting ourselves on clearance.
Yeah. Why has this become the norm?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, when I think back on my career, and I love to kind of share a little bit about my story as I answer this question. Um,
Absolutely.
when I first started really unpacking this for myself, I started off talking about a time when I was lowballed to $85,000, and my predecessor was making, hold your seats, $175,000. And so that stings just to know that. And so I started doing all this work to unpack, why did I accept it? I knew I didn't like it. I knew I didn't, wasn't pleased with the salary. But when I started, and this was not in real time, it was after the fact, when I started to unpack why I accepted that rate, it was actually the salary before the $85,000.
Mm.
There was a time when I was in receiving a promotion that I had worked really, really hard for, like 17 hours a day worked hard for. And my upcoming boss came to me and he offered me $65,000. And I had already heard that others were making $100,000. And so when he said it, I said, man, I really expected it to be more than this. And his response, because I think this is important, was, girl, you're about to be rolling in dough. This is more than I've ever made when I was a store manager at your level. It was that girl moment. And what that was it was the start of me believing and accepting a limiting deposit, me shrinking myself from, I was in my mid 20s at this time, from woman to girl. And then I started girling all the way through my career. So,
Mm.
how do we get there? Let's trace back to the first time you were offered a salary, or maybe it was a childhood limiting deposit that was made inside of you, and then you just really had a hard time withdrawing your true worth from, and seeing your value contribution in the workplace. So that limiting deposits is the most common theme that I see as to how we got here.
Mm. It's sort of less of a one-time situation and more of a pattern of behaviors and decisions. I'm curious, because this is a personal experience for you, and you've also worked with clients who have been in this situation, right? If you could narrow down very practically, hey, if you're listening, here's the top three behaviors or top three decisions that you want to watch out for. Because there's a mindset piece that we may or may not be aware of. And then there's like, this is you if, right? What are those top
Right.
three behaviors or decisions? Let's start first with the workplace.
Yeah. So some of those top behaviors that we experience in the workplaces, and it's not always deliberate or meant to be demeaning, but some of that just common language that doesn't allow you to operate in your value. And I like to put this in terms of like the clearance rack. Why do items wind up on clearance? It's one, because they maybe didn't make it out of the back room. I came from retail, so that's where this really came from. Is I know how the clearance cycle works, but they didn't make it off clearance. They made it to clearance because they did not make it out of the back room and off the truck properly. They were not merchandised properly, and so they weren't visible to be seen. So you'll start to see in the workplace that your visibility is starting to be subtly diminished because you're not being presented to the opportunities or being invited to the table. So when you start to see that happening, where you're not getting the visibility, even though you may be advocating for it, I think that is something that you should, some of the early behaviors that you should watch for. Again, I want to just keep reiterating those limiting deposits, because myself, clients that I work with, we always have to take stop and just really understand, what have we been hearing? Because when deposits are made into our brain, our subconscious, then that's how we actually behave. So we're responding to the behaviors of others, because they may be saying things in the workplace like, girl, you're rolling in dough. So now that's what you start to believe when you start to get these limiting deposits. You might be hearing things in the workplace like, just keep doing this, and then you might get this opportunity. We call those dangling little sexy carrots that they dangle in front of us, that keep us stuck and keep us not making the salary that we deserve. So those are the behaviors
Mm.
that I would say that we should, really just be watchful of. And then I would say, in response, how are you responding to it? How are you
Mm.
responding to those limiting deposits? How are you responding to those dangling sexy carrots? What is your body actually feeling? And I say that because I remember when I was offered the 85K, I was not excited. I felt a weight on me, but I ignored that weight because I thought the trade-off was, well, if I accept 85K, then I don't have to work nights and weekends in my store anymore. So I'm gonna take this trade-off, but I completely ignored this feeling of weight, disappointment, worry that I was not going to be able to, to live the lifestyle that I thought I was going to be living, right?
Mm.
So I think it's important, our behaviors in response to our workplace behaviors is to stop, listen to your body, and then now let's go forth with honesty about what we were feeling about those salaries, about what somebody said to us.
I love that because it helps us to become more aware of
Yes.
our behaviors. There's so many blind spots that we have, and sometimes we engage in behaviors or decisions without actually knowing what's behind it. So paying attention to how we feel can be a really good kind of way to catch it before the
Yes.
trigger actually, results in the cue and the behavior that takes place. And one of the things that you mentioned was really interesting. It's like as you are hearing this and you're thinking, okay, well, I'll take this lower salary because I have more hybrid days or because I have more work flexibility. And it's this idea that in order to get something, you have to give something up. But it is supposed to be advancement. You have more skills, and so your work is worth more. And so instead of saying, "Oh, I get this bonus, so let me give you something back," it's like, "No, this bonus is on top of it, and you should still get that salary increase because your skills have developed over the last year, 2 years, etc."
Absolutely. And you've earned it and you deserved it. And I think the reason why we don't realize that is because a lot of these decisions sometimes too are made like in the moment. You feel like you have to respond. You have to respond and give them an answer about the salary that they're presenting you. And to my point earlier about some of those signs that you are undervalued is when you stop negotiating. And I use a concept called yes at first sight. You're saying yes at first sight to the salary because you believe that for some reason, and there's several different reasons culturally that we believe this, that if you push back, you may lose the offer. You don't know how to negotiate. That's the biggest one. You have no framework. So I would be really wrong if I came on a podcast and said, just go ask. And I didn't say, well, this is how you ask, or this is what you should do, because I didn't know. It wasn't until I actually mentioned it to a mutual friend of ours, Jamila, and she was like, wait a minute, you shouldn't make that much money. I actually made 160,000. Why are you between 85 and 100,000? And then we start talking about negotiation, right? And so don't say yes at first sight. It takes us to stop and really understand, like give it some time, 48 to 72 hours to say, I want to go think about this. I need to go take inventory. I need to consult with someone before I say yes. You'll escape the yes at first sight, but then you won't feel this urge and need to accept the trade-off that is undervaluing your worth.
Oh gosh, I absolutely love you bringing this up. A little bit of a side note here in negotiations, right before we get into your value framework, which I'm so excited for. But what you're saying essentially, and I tell people all the time, I think some of it comes from personifying your company. And people think they're interacting with a person. Oh, I have this social contract with you, but they're not a person. It's a business transaction. And the person you're interacting with, it's not their money when they give you a raise. It's not their money. It's the company's money. And the company has plenty of it. And so this is where, part of it is that mindset shift from, and I think, I'm not going to get too into this, but I think as someone like myself who's first generation, who's like, I don't know, like you said, I didn't know how to negotiate. I didn't know how these things worked. And so because there's a person that's talking to me, I imagine that if I ask for an increase, I'm asking for money out of their pocket. That's what it felt like. But it's not. This is a business transaction. So you should always, like you said, ask for that time because they would ask for that time. Anytime you have two business people at the table, they're each going to want to know the contract. They're going to want to ask questions, go back and talk to the lawyers. Like there's all these things that happen. It's absolutely normal. And I don't think we were brought up to believe that that was normal, to take your time to think it through.
Because the person who's offering you that role, they negotiated their role. They more than likely negotiated to get the salary they got. So you know what that means? That means that they're expecting candidates to negotiate. And only 33% of candidates who accept roles are actually negotiating. And recruiters are always expecting you to negotiate because they are not even offering you the top of the salary band. They're never coming to you and going, this is the max I can give you. Here's your salary. They're managing their P&Ls, right? They're managing their P&Ls. They have budgets and P&Ls, and they're likely offering you somewhere between that low and that medium range in the band. So there is room to negotiate. They expect you to negotiate. So don't let them down and don't let yourself down either. That's how I'd sum that up.
You're so good. They expect you to negotiate. And in fact, you are viewed as a higher caliber professional if you do negotiate. And just like you said with the clearance rack, it's such a good analogy. So let's dive deeper into this clearance rack analogy. You talked about a value framework. Can you just from the very beginning kind of break it down high level, and then we can go into each phase?
Absolutely. So clearance rack, right? When we think about it, and I mentioned it a little bit, but items make it to the clearance rack because they were not merchandised properly. They did not make it out the back room. The customer did not buy it, right? And so when we come into the store as consumers, we buy an item off the clearance rack. There is no way possible that we're going to come back to the store later. If we spent $10 for that black sparkly blazer, we're not going to come back after it was marked down 90% and purchase it again for $100, right? Like we're just not going to do that. We're not, that's not, it's not smart, honestly. So I compare and use what I love as a metaphor of that's how I look at our careers. That $65,000 salary that I was offered, that was the first time that I put myself on the clearance rack because I did not know my value. And that, so with that, it leads me to the V. And there's a couple of iterations out there, but for the sake of understanding this, and the one that I think is really important is that valuing documentation. I had never, and I was in my mid 20s at this time, I had never taken the time to actually sit down and take inventory of my accomplishments, my skills, the value that I'd added to the organization, looking at my KPIs. I'd done performance reviews and I knew like, but I was going to accept the 3 to 4%. But I never sat down and said, because I have reduced turnover by this much, this is value that I'm adding. Like I didn't go and take inventory of those metrics. So before you even make it to those conversations, be proactive to your point. That V is valuing documentation. Go document your wins, your brag notes, all the things that you've been recognized for in the workplace. Go document all those things. And it's gonna give you confidence, right? It's gonna give you confidence. When I sit down and look at all the things I've accomplished, sometimes I go read my LinkedIn reviews when I'm feeling down. Like I feel better about myself because I know that I've been able to take a clean inventory of what I've done. So that's the V.
I love that. I love that with V. It's not just, you're talking not just about documenting the metrics in real time, because you know those are really hard to get in the future, right? So documenting the metrics, documenting the concrete pieces of the successes you've had, but also you're talking about kind of like a kudos file, right? Those things that may not be on your resume, but there are these quotes and these things that you're like, oh yeah, I did make a real impact on real people. And so to me, it feels like there's multiple layers to this value documentation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's the qualitative and the quantitative, and they both matter. But when you go and gather that quantitative, it's kind of similar to you going to a pay scale and entering in all your qualifications and getting your salary. It's about how you use those tools, and the quantitative definitely matters.
I love that. So we got V down. If y'all are following us, we got V. We got A now. What is A? Tell us about it.
Yeah, I love that earlier when we were talking, you brought up that the company is not a person. Jamila Brown says corporate America is not a person. So this one is about asserting clear boundaries. The company has boundaries in the way that they manage their P&L. They can spend this much, they want to take in this much. That is the boundary that we need to place on our career. So the A is assert clear boundaries. What is my current role, or what have I accomplished? And this is what I'm looking forward to. This is what I want to move forward to. And this is how much I can accept based on my market research, based on me going through my brag notes, this based on just my performance over the last several years. Like there has to be boundaries as to what value you've contributed and how much you know based on research your salary is worth, and then what are you going to clearly ask for. So you have to assert the same boundaries that the organization does.
I love that. You have to be clear on your boundaries first. So define that for yourself and then go out there and make sure that you're asserting them. I love this. So V and A, let's move on to L. What is L for?
Loudly communicate. A lot of times we are in the workplace and we're hinting at what we want. Oh, maybe, if I do this, I would humbly accept that we're exchanging gratitude for compensation. We have to be loud and clear about what we want and what we desire in the workplace, but also loudly communicating what we know our value is. So if we are being approached with an offer and we're subtly hinting at, well, I was thinking more of this salary, like me. Oh, I thought I was going to make more. Imagine if I had said, I did market research. I also heard from several store managers that $100,000 was probably the base for this role. Based on my contribution, I would like to counter with this offer. That's me clearly and loudly communicating what I want versus, oh, I thought it was just going to be more. So we have to be clear and loud about what we expect as well as the value that we look to receive in the workplace.
Absolutely. What you're, as you're talking, what comes to my mind that I'd love to ask you about is There are ways to loudly communicate that strategically
Mhm.
before that conversation comes up to
Absolutely.
basically anchor your value, right? What are some suggestions or examples that you either teach your clients or that you've used yourself in terms of anchoring your value in day-to-day work before the offer, before the opportunity comes up?
100%. You're so spot on with that. So one of the common practices that I did when I was in corporate America and the way I advise clients now is to take ownership of your individual development. So a lot of us, when I say loudly communicate, is we're waiting on somebody to come and pick us out and say, "Hey, I want to give you this salary." But what if we're the ones, like I did in my career, after a while, that owned my development and said, "Hey, supervisor, I would like to set up time to talk about what I want in my career. I want to set up time to talk about the position that I want to be in, my development assignments, and towards the end when I was there, the salary that I'm looking to get to so that I can do more in my career." So take ownership of it by scheduling conversations. You got, again, this is after you've sat down and written out your goals because you don't want to go into those conversations hinting. You want to make sure that you are stating what that is and then tell them what you are doing, what you want to do, and then ask for support. Put the ball back in their court. What support can you provide me to help me reach those goals?
That's so good. So far, if you're following, we've got value documentation, assert clear boundaries, loud communication. And I love you. Tell us what you is about. I feel like this is one that goes just forgotten when we think about, being able to command a higher salary. So I'll just let you take it away. What is you for?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different things, and I'm gonna quickly say both of them because I think they're both important because they got me, to the place where I was more confident in my negotiation. But one is unapologetically ask, right? Being unapologetic in your ask. So it kind of goes alongside the loudly communicate, but when your language says, "Well, maybe I was thinking," versus that confident, "This is what I would like," that unapologetic demeanor that you have actually shows, to your point earlier, that you are worth that salary. But the other iteration of the you is uplifting others. And the reason I like this one is because I remember when after I got the 85K salary, and then I had to fight a little bit for it. I decided after I knew that I had been lowballed that I was never going to let that happen to another person. Like it became my mission to make sure that people who I offered salaries to, that I would put a little bit of extra care and attention to ensuring that they were brought in for their work. There was an individual that I was bringing on, and I went and sent her salary up, and it came back lower than what I was proposing, and I
Mhm.
decided to fight. I built case studies, and I literally got on a line and advocated for this young lady who I was bringing on my team, who I knew was very qualified the entire time. And I was doing this because this is like I was able to work a little bit remotely. This was back in like 2015.
Mhm.
The entire time that I was doing it, my mother-in-law was staying with us at the time because I had just had my daughter, and she was listening to me advocate for this young lady in her role. She came to me a couple of days later and said, "Man, I've been listening to you. It gave me courage to go and actually ask my boss for more money, and I got a raise today." And
That's
I saw
amazing.
the value then of it's the you being uplift others. I was able to see the value then of me advocating for this person. One, it had a domino effect where it was able to help other people. I wouldn't have known that $85,000 wasn't too much if I didn't have my mentor screaming and banging about salaries around that time. So it's important that we put ourselves in a position where we can uplift others and advocate for others. And sometimes that's really practice when it's time for you to start advocating for yourself.
So good. And I feel like it's overlooked so many times, in particular the uplift others, is because we're focused on, okay, what's the practical thing to do? And to me, this is kind of values alignment, right? If you truly believe what you say and believe the behaviors and the actions, it's going to permeate your entire community. And so to me, uplifting others is that space where um, kind of your values, right? We're talking about value, but then also your values, like your values come in, right? And if one of your values is, hey, negotiating is important. It should be a value for you and for everybody around you. And so to me, it's kind of like, don't just take the action, but be the person that believes, right, the entire values framework, right? So
Absolutely.
far, we've gone through everything but the E. So what does this E stand for in value?
Yes, absolutely. And so this is the kind of the cyclical portion of it, right? And that is evidence. It doesn't stop when you first take that inventory. As you move forward in your career, you're going to continue to gather evidence, tracking your wins, the proof of your performance, because again, you end up on the clearance rack because you accepted this thing, and you can stay stuck in that role if you don't continue to gather evidence and the proof of your performance. And so make that a system that you build, those touch bases with your boss, make that you coming home every day and gathering evidence of just 5 minutes reflection of your day to make sure that you continuously are able to just acknowledge your value that you're adding, how you're growing as a leader. Because a lot of times, yes, we know there are planned promotions, but sometimes you're on the spot. Hey, I was thinking about you for this role. Tell me,
Mm-hmm.
what your thoughts are. You now have evidence that you have written down that you're tracking in your reflections, where you are more likely to confidently talk about why you should be there versus stumbling, being apologetic in your ass. Like, you can confidently talk about it, and then you still, cherry on top, say, give me about 48 hours to think about it, right? But if you continue to gather evidence, you're more savvy on the fly when you're asked about that. And it's also an infusion of confidence for yourself.
I love this. And it absolutely, and tell me if I'm, making an assumption here that's not accurate, but in my mind, it just feels like that cycles back up to value documentation, right? You get the metrics, you get the evidence, and you just start all over again with value, right?
Yep.
VALUE.
Yep. Yep. Very cyclical.
This
And
is
it doesn't
great.
stop. It doesn't stop. Again, the item that was marked down to clearance was purchased and taken out of the store. It is very unlikely that that same customer is going to come back and pay that kind of markup for you at regular price. And so I'll kind of, share as well. Like, sometimes it means for you to get off the clearance rack after you do this value cycle, you may have to go to another company to get your value. Go to another
100%.
company to get to go ahead and reset to premium pricing, premium behavior, and then make sure that you don't get back on the clearance rack again. And then if you do, you got a framework to help you get off of it.
That is wonderful. And I don't think when you and I talked, I don't know if I shared this, and I may have shared it before, but here we go again, right? I remember when it clicked for me that I was like, I'm being underpaid. I do a lot, right? I went to my leader at the time. She was a person who always had a very straight face. And so I was like, I can't take anything she says personally. Like, it's just a personality thing, right? And so, but I go up there and I'm really young at this point. I'm really young. It's the first time asking for, a raise or any kind of conversation. I didn't even know how to do it. But I remember she came into my office and I was like, hi, I would like to talk about, and I don't think I said that. I think I went on, I don't know if it was YouTube or what, but I had done my little preparation, right? And so I'm like, I grew the program from this to this. We've increased this to this. I gave some outcomes, and the position itself has grown as well. And so I'd love to have a conversation about increasing my salary. I didn't say 50%, I didn't say 10%. Her response, she literally said, we don't have it in the budget. And I was like, okay, that's fair. I was like, I have to be super honest with you. Like, right now, I'm in a position where I need to make more financially. And so I want to have this conversation because I want to stay here, but I will need to go looking for something that is going to pay me a little bit more just financially. It's just out of my control right now. And she goes, well, let me know when you get an interview. She said, let me know when you get an interview. And I was like, well, by then at that point, I was already kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is a business transaction. And so I just was like, by that time, it will be too late, but thank you.
Yeah.
And I left. Like, and that's one of the things that, like, that was the moment that it clicked for me. Like, she and I still are on good terms. Or, I haven't talked to her in a very long time, but like we left on good terms. There was no issues. That's the moment where I was like, oh, this is truly a business transaction. She can decide that she's not going to pay anymore, and I'm going to decide that I'm going to leave, and she's still a good person, and I'm still a good person. But that moment kind of came up when you were sharing that. You may not get the answer you want, and that's okay because even that answer moves you forward.
It is not personal. And if you ask me what was the one thing that could get you off the clearance rack, even aside from value, I would say, and you said the word, a decision. One of our earlier episodes, probably episode 2, I think it was titled Open Marriage. Spicy, right?
Mm.
And I
You're
started
funny.
talking about like,
I'm like, where are we going with this?
I started talking about you are not in wedding vows, you are in a business contract with your employer, and you should be in an open marriage. You should always be dating other jobs, because one of the things
Yeah,
that
you're
gives you
definitely not
confidence,
married. You're definitely just dating, and you can
it's
go to anybody else at that point.
it's not because they can't commit to you.
Yeah.
Like, so, responsibly, they cannot commit to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have, and they're dating. I always had a succession plan, because I know that somebody could come to me and tell me that they, found another job. So they have a succession plan because they're in an open marriage. We have a succession plan for our careers because we're in an open marriage. And once you really get that and know what you're there for, this negotiation process actually it puts you more at ease because you have options.
Yeah.
When she says, I don't have the budget, okay, well, I've been talking to 3 other companies already. And so I know, what my worth is in the marketplace. So let
Yeah.
me go and keep talking to and you don't take it personal. So I love that story.
All employment is at will. You are not committed. You actually aren't even married if you think about it. Like, you're
When
not
you
even,
really
you're
think
not
about it.
even there. You're not even there. So like take the jump. Okay. So I have absolutely loved our conversation. I know we can go on and on, but for the sake of time, can you tell us, if everyone is listening right now, what do you want to boil this down to? What's like your final thought that you want to leave us with?
Yes. And I shared it a little bit already, but I want to reiterate the difference between you making the salary that you deserve and making the salary that you keep accepting is your decision. It's your decision that the limiting deposits were not facts, they were just feelings, or they just weren't facts, it was just words out of someone else's mouth. Your decision to be courageous enough to unapologetically ask, not fearing rejection. Your decision to spend the time, because time is one of our most valuable commodities. Spend the time taking inventory proactively of what you've done in your career that allows you to confidently ask for what you deserve. It's a decision. We have to decide that we
Mhm.
want to start to operate in our full premium value.
I absolutely love that. It's that decision making point. And I know when folks get on to, have a conversation with you or with me or with any coach, really, that is something to applaud. It's the first step that's the hardest. And so I'm glad that you came here to share your value framework. And if you're listening right now, this value framework is not only easy to understand and easy to remember, but Candice is literally, as we speak, she's putting together all of this in a step-by-step how-to book that's coming out pretty soon. So I really encourage you to get plugged into all things Candice by downloading the Career Blueprint so that you can get the newsletter at 5minutecareerhack.com. And of course, Denise went ahead and provided that link in the description of this episode. But Candice, where else can we find you as we are cyber stalking you to wait for that book?
Yes, absolutely. So one, follow me on LinkedIn, Candyce Hunt on LinkedIn. Absolutely, to your point, subscribe to the 5 Minute Career Hack newsletter. Everything that we are doing and putting out in regards to get off the clearance rack is coming straight through 5 Minute Career Hack. And then lastly, we release 2 episodes a week on our podcast. One is a 5 to 10 minute digestible action items that you can take every week to elevate your confidence, your career, and your compensation. Be sure to subscribe and set your alerts for the podcast that we release videos for every week.
Yeah, so it's a podcast, but she's also on YouTube. So it's kind of cool to have that dual experience. So links are in the description for the 5 Minute Career Hack and for her LinkedIn, and search for that podcast. Candice, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I truly enjoyed exchanging stories with you.
I know. Me too. Me too. Until next time, everyone, thanks so much for being here. Know that we're cheering you on and we're praying for you, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.